Welcome. I am so excited that you are here today.
You can't even hold it. You can't hold it.
Oh. We are
Red Weather Christians.
I'm Jen.
I'm Steve.
Welcome.
Meep merp.
Oh my gosh.
Meep boop bop bop.
On today's episode, we are going to be talking about rule-following robots. First, we're going to be talking about why it seems that many Christians get to just pick and choose rules from the Bible and the religion. And then we're going to talk about why they become rule-following robots. Meet moop. But first, a fun college story from Steve.
That's because I had fun college stories and Jen did not.
Oh,
Let's
come
be clear.
on.
Anyway, well, Jen, there's just so many of them.
I know. It's hard to choose. And a quick aside before you start, I just always think it's funny that somehow I was attracted to you during all of this. Like, what? I was more of a rule follower for sure.
Oh, but you like the bad boys.
Oh my gosh. I guess so. The bad boys. Yeah, you're going to hear what a bad boy Steve is in a minute here. Okay, I'll stop talking. You go ahead.
So sophomore year of college, I had come on campus with roller skates. I found them in a northern Wisconsin thrift store, and they were just my size. So I would roller skate to class, roller skate around campus. And mind you, Jen will probably interject here, I was absolutely no good.
No, he was so bad. This was before we were dating. And I just remember thinking, who is this kid? He's so bad on roller skates. He's the most awkward, but as confident as can be with his gross goatee, long goatee. He had a mustache and a long goatee and a shaved head at the time. He was a sight, and he would wear short shorts.
Lexi Lawless, everybody, U.S. men's national team. That's what I was.
Anyway, it was
year.
ridiculous. Go on.
So not that I couldn't roller skate, but that I couldn't roller skate backwards. I was a little bit uncoordinated with them, but they also were pretty bad roller skates. So much so that about 2 months in, one of them just chipped off because it was like a plastic wheel. And I had to stop. But so I went to the caf after class one day. That's short for cafeteria. And the lady at the front says, you can't go in with roller skates on. It's like, huh? Where's that rule? She's like, you can. You can't ride a skateboard in here. Blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, I guess I'll take my roller skates off then. But I don't have shoes.
Did you have socks on even?
I might not have had socks.
Ugh.
But you definitely weren't allowed to go into the caf barefoot either. You had to have shoes on. So I was like, what do you want me to do? I'm here to eat lunch. I have either skates on, which you tell me aren't allowed, or no shoes, which you tell me isn't allowed. Which rule do you want me to break?
Oh, goodness.
That wasn't the only calf story, but we're going to leave the other ones maybe.
Well, what did you do? You're leaving us hanging here.
I just walked in.
With the skates on?
No, because I can't walk with the skates. I was already uncoordinated enough, and I agreed that I probably shouldn't be having a tray with wheels on my feet.
For sure, I would have had a bad result.
I was going to try.
Breaking the rules.
Anyway, it was fun to break the rules. It is sometimes, and that's sometimes what life is about.
Yeah. And I am more of a rule follower for sure, but I am aware of rule following robots, and I am self-aware enough to not be one or try not to be one. And that's kind of the point of this episode, is that it does seem like a lot of people in religion kind of get caught up in the rules and maybe legalism, and they can't get out. So they kind of get that grip on the rules, and they can't let go. So we're going to talk about that today.
So this started early in my Christian walk in middle school. There is confirmation class in some denominations. I was a regular attender. I memorized lots of scripture, still have it memorized. And then came this class where I had to fill out this workbook about all the things that I already knew, some of which was church history I didn't know. But then it came down to, if you don't do this work, you cannot be confirmed. Confirmed as what? Is what I was saying. My parents were into it. I think my siblings had already done it. And I told my parents, what does this mean? What difference does this make whether I'm confirmed or not? If I believe in Jesus, isn't that good enough? And they smiled and they agreed, and yet they still wanted me to get confirmed.
Yeah. So did you?
I did get confirmed eventually. Yes, I did pass that class, but otherwise, a stellar student in school, I was the lowest achieving confirmation class member
Yeah.
at my church.
Yeah. I never did any of that. So on this episode, we're going to start with why it seems that many Christians get to pick and choose rules from the Bible to follow. Like, oh, these verses from the Bible we're going to view as rules, and these verses we're going to just totally, completely ignore. Or, these verses we're going to take literally and see them as rules. And these verses, well, these are clearly figurative, so they're not rules. So we're going to talk about that first, and then we're going to talk about why we become rule-following robots. Beep boop.
Right. So if you're familiar with Jesus' time on earth, you'll know that his main opponents were Jewish, like he. But they were the equivalent of rule-following robots. They were the Pharisees. They hated that he didn't follow the rules like they did.
Yeah, that was like big contention.
And he didn't hate them. He loved everybody. But he really didn't like that they were so focused on the rules. He thought they forgot how to love people.
Oh my goodness, just saying that out loud, it just makes me think of how people are today. Like just so focused on the rules that they're forgetting how to love people.
So we want to go through a couple of rules for you. If you're listening to this and you want to be a better Christian, rule-following Christian that is, we have some advice for you. It's from 1 Timothy 2. So men out there, get ready for these rules when you go to worship next time.
First, men, when you pray, you better lift up holy hands without anger or disputing.
And then, of course, rules for women. Dress modestly. So no elaborate hairstyles, gold, pearls, or expensive clothes. And of course, women should learn in quietness and full submission, and that women are not permitted to teach or assume authority over a man.
And then the last clause of that sentence is she must be quiet.
Yeah, so just making sure everyone's aware of those rules.
Yeah. Oh, I know I am.
So that's just a starter course of when or why we might break those rules.
Well, picking and choosing. Like we seem to care more about the rules about women being in submission and being quiet and not teaching and not having authority rather than the man lifting holy hands. Now, you can look up these verses, you can look up commentaries, and there are a lot of different commentaries on these verses as to what it means to lift up holy hands. Like, well, that's not actually literal. That's talking about just how deeply men need to go when they pray as far as what they're praying about and things like that. But the point is that somebody also made that interpretation, multiple interpretations of this passage. Somebody also decided, well, this part we're not going to take literally. I know there's one part, maybe it's in a different translation or in a different passage where it talks about women's hair and braids. And, it's just like weird stuff like that. Like, don't wear pearls. Don't wear your hair in braids. It's like, okay, so this is what? Cultural. This is figurative, and braids actually mean some other thing. It means they're worshiping some other goddess or something like that. But I think all of this craziness is kind of our point. Like there's a lot going on culturally and just through the translations and through all the interpretations that it's weird to think that through all of that muck and mire that we've come out to the other side picking out these clean and simple rules. Like, oh, well, wading through all that muck and mire, we have decided that yes, women should be submissive. But the men lifting holy hands, oh, well, that's figurative, and here's why, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean, I would choose not to follow that rule, that first one, if I could, and the other one doesn't affect me, so I don't usually care. Except that it doesn't make any sense either. Here's where we pick and choose rules out of convenience, out of tradition.
Out of who does it benefit the most? White male.
And then if that benefit keeps those who benefit in power, even better.
Right.
But if I look at when I picked different rules to follow at APU, it was just funsies. That was it. Or by sheer accident, I have roller skates or I have bare feet. I'm going to break a rule.
Yeah.
So there are more, but that one was specific to the New Testament, because sometimes you get these Christians who say, don't bring up the Old Testament, we're in the New Covenant now. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, because there's some crazy stuff in the Old Testament that Christians are quick to excuse as Old Covenant, Old Testament. We don't even need to look at that, blah, blah, blah. But this was New Testament, so...
We are going to go back to the Old Testament, and this one's found in Exodus 1:15 through 22. We have a Pharaoh who is worried about the Israelites multiplying. And he says, all right, Hebrew midwives, you need to kill all of the babies that are boys.
Right. And, if anyone out there listening is a midwife or has employed one, you'll know that, midwives, they tend to love babies. These midwives did love babies, and they did not like this decree that, oh yeah, just kill them. If they're boys, you kill them. Like a midwife is going to be like, okay.
So they didn't kill them, but then Pharaoh asked them if they did. They lied. They said, no, we didn't get there in time. These Hebrew women just had the babies already, so we didn't know. And they were celebrated for that.
Right, for lying.
It's written that was a celebrated decision. Verse 20 says, God was good to the midwives. He approved of this. Some of you Old Testament scholars will recognize this is before the Ten Commandments came out, so that it wasn't any sort of thou shalt not bear false witness contradiction.
Yeah.
There's no rule yet, but we have lying as being celebrated. And I've read different explanations of this and but they chose the morally superior choice, which is to save innocent lives as opposed to lying. So now you have someone arbitrarily saying which one is a morally superior good.
Yeah, there's a lot of subjective opinion there.
And a lot of other perspective could say, hey, that's a slippery slope if you're going to justify the means by whatever ends you think are going to happen. Because what could have happened was they lie to Pharaoh, and the baby boys are spared for now, but then Pharaoh finds out about it and then kills all the boys anyway. Well, then they still lied, and the boys' lives aren't saved. Their ends don't actually happen. And then you could say, well, their intentions were good. Are good intentions what justify these? I mean, think about the phrase. What do they say is the path paved with good intentions?
To hell. But, if we were to go back to that midwife situation, I would have wanted them to lie. I feel like that is a good example of when to break the rules, and they're doing that for a very good cause. And that's why these statements like the ends justify the means, true, false, or agree, disagree. I used to do these statements with my students sometimes, and it's like there would always be a discussion because there is not a clear-cut answer for a statement like that, because it completely depends on the context you're in. You can't just say, well, I agree with it 100% of the time, because sometimes, like Steve said, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of idea, where it's just like, yeah, it's not going to end well. But yeah, I don't know. I go back to that midwife situation, and I think that was absolutely the right thing for them to do.
So you would pick and choose your rules?
In my life, when there is a rule presented to me, I feel like I need to look at that rule and think about that rule as a human and decide if that is a rule that I can abide by or not. And I know that sounds crazy. And like, if everybody just did that in the world, I feel like it'd be a little chaotic. But generally speaking, I follow the rules. It's only really, I feel, in extreme situations where there's a rule where I'm like, I can't do this. I can't follow this rule in good conscience. So that's a tricky question.
Right. And as much as I would love to have hard and fast rules that everybody follows, I often find myself in that tricky situation as well. Even more recently in my life, I was put in a difficult situation of following policy or just making a decision. And sometimes this is work related. Sometimes it's, religious, whatever it might be. I decided, well, I don't care about the policy. I need to do what's best for what I think is more important. In this case, it was my family. So does that mean my work relationship might suffer? Yeah, it might.
Yeah, sometimes in life, you're just put into a situation where it's kind of like you're going to make somebody mad. Who is it going to be? Like, you're going to break a rule over here on this side, or you're going to break a rule over here on this side. Like, that's just the situation that you're in, between a rock and a hard place, if you will.
Or between skates and bare feet, if you will.
True.
So one of the things that often comes up, though, with this whole idea of rule breaking and then applying it even kind of a deeper level of sin, is that all sin is equal. So these midwives obviously have sin in their lives because they lied, yet they did so for this higher purpose of saving innocent lives. However, the where they get this whole all sins are the same often comes from 1 John 3:4. Everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. That's pretty harsh. And
it's pretty clear cut.
And we don't like to use the word clearly, the Bible says, but here's what the Bible says in this particular instance. We have a much better, much more compassionate story, however, with someone who was caught sinning. This is from John 8. The Pharisees here are on the move. These, again, if you've forgotten, are the rule-following robots.
Mm-hmm.
And these robots want to see what this non-robot Jesus is going to do when presented with a robotic, logical situation, which is, here's a woman caught in adultery, we need to stone her to death. What do you want to do, Jesus?
And Jesus did not want to follow the rules set in place.
Right. So Jesus decides, I need to save this woman's life. Her life is more valuable than the rules. And so he began to write in the ground, we don't know what. He stood up, then addressed the crowd, all with stones in their hands, ready to stone the woman. And he said, he without sin cast the first stone. Boom.
Boom. Mic drop.
Where are your rules now, Pharisees?
Oh.
Everybody walked away. She broke the rules. She got caught breaking the rules. And what happened? She was told, does no one condemn you? Then neither do I. Go and sin no more. Now that's going to still be tough for her. It's going to be tough for any of us to go and sin no more. But the idea is rules can be broken and lives can still be healed or saved.
It feels like we're living in a time where the rules for so many people do seem clear-cut and they seem without flexibility. And that's difficult because God created us as complex beings. And we cannot fit into some kind of boxed standard of rules. I like to call that BS. We can't fit into that BS. We're complex. Every situation is a little bit different. Now, I'm not saying, well, then we can't have any rules. I think having rules is fine, but we need to be a human about the rules at the same time. So we don't just disregard the situation completely and lay down the law. Like, you look at the situation, you think about it, you talk about it, you discuss it. But in Christian circles, it's frustrating because it seems like the rules are just plucked out of the Bible based on who they benefit, which seems messed up. And, if anyone out there is listening and are like, that's not right at all, like, please respond. I want to hear what you have to say. But it seems like they're plucked. And then it seems like we just become rule-following robots to these select rules that have been plucked out of the Bible. And it doesn't seem right to not have a discussion about that.
I taught a Sunday school class to, 2nd through 4th graders or 3rd through 5th graders, something like that. And we would go through some of these stories and I'd ask, so who are the Pharisees? And almost every time, bless their little hearts, they would say they're the bad guys.
Yeah, right.
Now you might think of them as the bad guys in some cases, but I was like, hold on. They're not bad. Like, we want to have this black and white, good, bad discussion, but again, they were Jews, just like Jesus. They were misguided. They became rule-following robots, and that became the highest standard. And that's where this goes awry.
You mentioned the word standard, and, being a teacher for so many years, it just makes me think of like standardized tests and everything. And in our culture today, we love being standardized. We love to standardize ourselves. We want to know what our rank is. We want to know what our grade is. We want to know what our percentile is. We want to know how we rank against all the other people. Am I better? Am I better? We want to be the winners, not the losers. And there's so many things that we want about our own lives to be standardized. And that seems crazy to me. Again, going back to our beautiful complexity. And then we want to be narrowed down to a number, basically, because that's kind of what it is when it's just black and white. Like, did I follow the rule? Did I not? Like a checklist. And it's like, oh, I followed all the rules today. I'm at 100%. It's like life is not like that.
All of this has come to a different type of situation that we've lived in, but we've lived in it in two different places, and that is COVID and rules regarding how you are to live your life within the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been difficult. We've lived in the States during COVID and we've lived in Ecuador during COVID, and it's been hard both places, but in different ways. I would say we've lived most of our COVID lives in Ecuador, and it's difficult for us because the government will come up with these rules. It seems like arbitrarily to us, but the rules will be, close down the schools, but keep the restaurants and bars and grocery stores and malls all open. And yeah, that doesn't make sense to Steve and me.
Right. Whereas when we were in the States and it was suggested before the vaccine, hey, wear your mask, treat other people with respect. You don't know who is immunocompromised or what. We're like, yeah, let's do that. We'll do what we can. And people had a real hard time with wearing a mask.
Yeah, they thought that, it was taking away their rights and stuff like that, when it was just like, let's come together and get through this. And I guess now in the States, it's kind of a slight different issue of the vaccine is here, and now it's that people don't want to take it and all that. Whereas in Ecuador, that's not the case at all. I think almost everybody has the vaccine. Like, it's really rare for people not to. And yet Ecuador is still so strict with the schools.
And masks.
But just the schools. Yeah, and masks.
And now they require you to show your vaccination card to get into the grocery store.
Whatever. But the point is, I don't know what the point is. Life is complex, and it's hard to know which rules to follow all the time. And it does seem like sometimes rules need to be broken. And I don't know what to do about that.
Well, I'll just say, for the rules that we had to follow in the States, I was totally fine with them when it started. We had no idea what was going on. And now it seems like, man, I'm vaccinated. Why do I have to still follow these dumb rules? I always thought they were dumb, but I was willing to do it for the greater good, to follow them. And so I have both sides of this. Like, I can understand why someone doesn't want to follow the rules, the mandates, but I also understand why you should.
Well, in Ecuador, when you have to wear your mask outside, it just seems a little silly. When it's like everybody's vaccinated and I have to wear my mask when I'm outside on a walk,
And yet they are pretty lax on that. When I go for a run, a lot of the other people who are running or biking or exercising, they have their masks down and nobody cares. Nobody actually cares. But the rules are still there, so everybody has a mask either around their neck or around their hand, ready in case someone says something.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, we've talked a lot about verses from the Bible and life and Steve's college times and COVID. And we're going to end this episode with a poem. Woo woo. A poem by E.E. Cummings. He is one of my favorites. He's just cool. He's a cool dude. Was a cool dude. Is, if he's somewhere. And his poem is called Old Age Sticks. And I will read it to you. Old age sticks up, keep off signs, and youth yanks them down. Old age cries, no trespass, and pass. Youth laughs, sing. Old age scolds, forbidden, stop, mustn't, don't, and youth goes right on growing old. Yes, that poem is difficult to read out loud. You should really look it up because of the way it's delineated and the way the parentheses work in it. So the part about the old age is all inside parentheses, and then the part about youth is all outside of the parentheses. So it's all about saying, like, old age is sticking up keep off signs. They're yelling no trespassing. They're scolding. They're using words like forbidden, stop, mustn't, don't. And then it talks about how the youth is yanking down the signs. The youth is laughing. But then the last stanza says, youth goes right on growing old. And this is something that Steve and I talk about a lot, and that is trying to live a life where we are accountable to not letting ourselves get sucked into this old age trap that E.E. Cummings talks about in his poem, where we just believe that we've gotten to the point of, well, we're old enough and we know the rules now. Like, we figured out what the rules are now, and they are black and white, and this is what they are, and we're going to enforce them on everybody we know in our lives.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that I told my physics students, and it's Newton's law of inertia. It's resistance to change.
Ooh.
Now, Newton was referring to that physically.
Right.
But I always told them, it's like all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't like it.
Yeah, we live life and we start getting comfortable in the things that we understand. And then the things that we don't understand, I feel like sometimes we just kind of start explaining away, and we just get to this point where, yeah, we're comfortable with what we believe. And I guess what Steve and I want to make sure for us is that we don't ever get to a point of feeling comfortable. That sounds weird, like, why wouldn't you want to be comfortable? But we just always want to keep the line open of discussion and disagreement. And we got an email a couple days ago from a guy in Texas, an atheist named Taylor, and he asked, hey, it would be cool if you guys had like a non-believer or an atheist as a guest on your show. And we're like, that is a good idea. Like, we would like to start doing guests. I would consider us novice podcasters still at this point. So logistics of having a guest is just something that we need to be open to, that change in our podcast. We need to figure that out. We need to challenge ourselves and do that. So that is something that is definitely on the horizon. So going back to the Cummings poem, we just want to make sure that we are not the youth who just goes on growing old. I know that we're growing old physically. It's happening. Wrinkles are happening. Gray hairs are happening. But our minds, we would love to try to keep fresh and open to people who disagree with us, new ideas, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so remember, in this season, we are wading through the muddy waters of what it means to be a Christian in modern society, one episode at a time.
Thank you guys for pressing play today. Please join the conversation. Email us, send a message via social media. All of that information is in the episode description. And thanks for joining us today. We are Red Weather Christians.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Jen.
Beep boop.